Okay, so everyone's here that's coming. We only have one absence, Mr. Carl. He's still not able to attend. The committee has 8 members, so if we drop below 5, the meeting will end immediately. So we currently have 7 people here. So if we lose 3 of those present, we will have to stop. So calling the meeting to order, first item is to approve the agenda. The agenda is published for the public. Need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Schell, seconded by Dawn. Any proposed changes to the agenda? There is one addendum, item of correspondence with a photo from Mr. Taylor. So we will vote on the agenda with the item of correspondence added to the addendum. All those in favor? And that carries. Now the minutes from May 16th. Need a mover that was present at that meeting. Moved by Catherine, seconded by Mac. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, we will vote on the minutes from May 16th. All those in favor? And that carries. Disclosure of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, there are no presentations, no delegations, no briefings, so we will move right on to business. Business is section 8. There is an item of cultural heritage business, which is first in the agenda, so that's up first. Dr. Campbell is going to introduce the item. It's the 2017 Civic Museum's year-end report.
So thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Every year we bring forward to this committee an annual report, particularly highlighting the programming and exhibitions at the city's museums. So the McLaughlin Woodworking Museum, the Pump House Steam Museum, City Hall is a National Historic Site, as well as a report on the Civic Artifact Collection. And this is looking at 2017. I wanted to introduce this report today so that I could highlight some of the things that we succeeded in accomplishing last year, while also thinking about what we're moving toward in 2018. So just to highlight, the report that comes, the appendix report that comes along with this is quite long. It's about 30 odd pages. So I did want to pull some of the sort of high-end pieces out for you. So last year in 2017, we had 3 central priorities at the museum: the commemorations of Canada's sesquicentennial, the renovation of our accessible washroom at the Pump House Steam Museum, and interpretation and programming updates across the sites. And if you remember this presentation from last year, you will remember me saying we're working really hard to sort of professionalize and streamline and update our processes at the museums. So last year, we were incredibly happy that we had about 30,000 visitors to our civic museums. 16,000 of those came from City Hall as a National Historic Site. And this involved, I think, a real intensification of our offerings at City Hall. We had more interpretation via the HRC. We drew 500 people in through the HRC lecture series. We also had updates to our guided tour program that runs and continues to run from downstairs and the HRC. We also, I hope this is showing, we also drew a tremendous audience. And one of the things I wanted to highlight for this group are the challenges and the exciting opportunities that are presented by the fact that we draw visitors from across the world. And we really think about City Hall as a historic site operating almost in 2 seasons. We have the tourist season, when we really do have international visitation, and then we have the off season, when we have residents. So that's when our educational programs really take foot. That's when we have HRC lectures, etc. So this year we had, for the first time, the ability to kind of track where we were getting visitation from, and that showed us how successful we are in really being a place in Kingston to which international visitors do come. You'll often receive, as part of your committee work, the opportunity to speak in and approve and pass on to council recommendations for the Civic Artifact Collection, and you passed about 14 of those last year. And this is an example of the kind of conservation work that was undertaken as part of the team's work last year. So this is Archibald McLean, before and after conservation. He's downstairs on the first floor, just to the right of the commissioner's desk as you come in. But you can see on the left pre-conservation and on the right post-conservation, revealing an entire sunset in the background that had been overpainted. So this is something that our team works on, is the conservation of all of the works of art that are in this room, and something then that this committee has an opportunity to speak on and comment on as these works come up. All of these numbers are prepared for you in the report, but again, just to highlight some of them, success last year in pushing things out through research. We had 5 research requests for our archaeological collection, which is something every collection wants to do. It wants to not only exist for the people it serves, but also be an ongoing source of knowledge for the community. We had 14 objects, as I've said, that you worked with the Heritage Assets Working Group to move through the accessions process. We had 65 objects in the Civic Collection go on display for the first time ever, so City of Kingston was able to see those objects that we care for. We put 19 pieces of fine art from our fine art collection on show for the first time in about 20 years as one of the Pump House exhibitions. And we had 48 objects that came to us as loans from other city-held museums, so not City of Kingston museums, but museums within the City of Kingston that hold parts of our collective history. We tracked our site demographics by age distribution, and they are exactly as we expected them to be, but I'm happy to report on those. So pretty much the same between the McLaughlin and the Pump House, where we're getting the highest proportion of adults, second to children, and then, of course, seniors. Site attendance and online rankings really reflect the attendance numbers overall of the sites. City Hall is number 4 on TripAdvisor's places to see in Kingston. We follow Fort Henry, the Kingston Penitentiary, and Bellevue House. So it's an important part of where we sit in sort of the experience of the City of Kingston. We also then have the Pump House as number 11, coming up against those 4 I've just listed, as well as some others, and then the McLaughlin Woodworking Museum at number 17. Just to put that in context, there are about 30 different museum offerings in the City of Kingston. Again, I won't go through all of these numbers, but last year one of our priorities was sort of really activating the sites through programming and exhibitions, special events, educational programs, and public programming. We're a team of 10 in the Cultural Heritage Group in Cultural Services as part of Community Services, but we have the support of 38 volunteers and 16 students through over the course of the year. We were delighted last year as part of Sesquicentennial. We had 1,000 visitors at the Pump House on Canada Day, which is an unprecedented number for us in the traffic that we drew. As I said before, we also had 500 HRC lectures, attendance, at HRC lectures, the Heritage Resource Center's lecture series. And the final number that I will just draw out here, we had 2,366 hours of programming available for the city to enjoy. One of our focuses last year was also the accessibility expansion at the Pump House, so the addition of an accessible washroom on the first floor. You all saw, and this came through Heritage Committee again, as this is a designated heritage structure, and we applied for and received, the permits necessary to add this piece onto the back of the Pump House. We also offer accessible programming financially. We joined the MFAP, so the Municipal Fee Accessibility Assistance Program, All of our exhibitions are offered in both official languages. At City Hall, we have guided tours in English, French, German, Mandarin, and Spanish, mapping on to the languages that we need. Free nights on Thursday evenings are another means of accessibility, reducing the financial barriers, as well as participation in programs like the K-Pass or the library passes for museums. So you might be wondering, after last year and your involvement in that expansion and its approvals, what did that end up looking like? And this is the rear yard of the Pump House presently. So it's been a beautiful space for us to come to occupy, and now open to the public in 2018 full time. This is also the Discovery Center on the bottom right, which went through an upgrade last year, so offering more programming space and availability for holding programs for the public. We actually refer to this, the accessible washroom area is now called the Lantern, because if we have night programs, it actually lights up. So I just wanted to end with pointing you towards some of the things that have happened at the sites that come out through this report. Again, it's a 30-page document. But last year, we revisioned one of our children's targeted programs, which is called Trains and Tots. to create an environment where children are brought into museums and become very comfortable with museum experiences as they grow up. So these become spaces to which they naturally expect they can go and where they can enjoy programming. So Trains and Tots is aimed specifically at tots. It capitalizes on the trains that are part of the exhibition at the Pump House. Last year, this group helped to approve the acquisition of that Lionel Ladies train set with quotes around ladies. Last year was an acquisition that you saw come through that now is part of this interpretation. So Trains and Tots last year brought 440 new museum experiences, new people to our museum, and already it's on track to surpass those numbers for this season. We also started Fortnite last year. Fortnite targets the next age group, youth to young adult, bringing them to the site and offering them an opportunity to engage the museum. This is part of our free nights on Thursdays, and last year it was incredibly successful. Come and build a fort. There was a challenge. It was based on science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics, and the intersection of them. And then we encouraged people to go and see movies in the square, etc. So integrating it with a downtown Thursday night experience. This year, we're trying something different, which is called Leo After Hours. And Leo After Hours has already drawn 40 people into the museum for a nighttime experience for adults only. The show we're currently running is Leonardo da Vinci, Relentless Curiosity, an examination of how Leonardo is both an artist and an engineer, before engineering was understood to be the profession it is today. This show already has additional programmatic aspects that you can find on our website, Leo After Hours, Discovery with Da Vinci. There is an HRC lecture coming on July 11th. Tim Soper, who built some of the models in the exhibit, will be giving an HRC lecture. And just as a prelude to next year, in 2019, the show at the Pump House will be looking at the industrial development and the social histories of Ontario Street, so the areas around the Pump House and how that area of town has grown up and how the waterfront in particular has developed. We upgraded our museum websites last year. This has been incredibly successful as well. We did beta testing and now we're into usability studies. So if you have time and you want to go visit the museum websites, I would welcome your feedback on them and how easy they were for you to navigate and find the resources and things you were looking for. Last two slides, the McLaughlin. Last year in 2017, we focused on a sesquicentennial exhibition, as well as really taking a very hard look at the way that the McLaughlin has been functioning. And this year, we've moved to a slightly different model, focusing on the tagline, hands-on history. And now we have a lot more programmatic offerings at the site because it was quite clear that people who come to the McLaughlin want to do something. They don't just want to passively receive an exhibition. So it's now programming. We have an expanded workshop. We offer both pre-enrolled workshops as well as drop-in kits that you can build on site using hand tools. We've updated the collection on display to really highlight the hand tools that you're able to use at the site so you can make the connection between how things used to be built with hand tools versus how you might build them today. So here's just an image of the expanded workshop space on the top right. Top left is the lumber kits, as we call them. So if you go to the McLaughlin now, there is no admission fee. You simply arrive at the site, have an opportunity to purchase a lumber kit, and then you have the opportunity to use our workshop space and the hand tools available to build those kits. And down at the bottom, just in closing, that's Diane Zemba, who's the operations manager for the Grand Theatre, building a birdhouse quite successfully. So thank you all for the opportunity to sort of intro this and give you a Coles Notes version of that 30-page report.
Thank you. So there is a recommendation, but before we get there, the questions from members of the committee are in order. Does anyone have any questions? Councillor Schell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Talking to the owner of Ahoy Rentals, did we realize how much it was going to be important to Ahoy Rentals that we put in this washroom at the Pump House?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At the time that the washroom was decided to be put as part of that renovation, it was a part of the sort of waterfront master plan, and there's a park adjacent to City Park. So there was a lot of conversation both with Public Works as well as with Recreation and Leisure Services to think about how best to supply a washroom where there isn't one actually until you reach Breakwater Park. So Ahoy was part of that consideration, but it was really minded towards the whole public who are using that waterfront pathway. And I'm happy to update that the washrooms are open now that they've been completed 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., which is fairly consistent with public washrooms across the city. So we now have them consistently open 7 days a week on that timing.
Fabulous. Good for tourism as well as the pump house. And you've been very careful about the numbers, which are wonderful, not comparing them to other sites in the city, but from what I can tell, our overall number of 30,000 is comparable to some of the major sites in Kingston that do have a lot of professional backing as well. So I'm congratulating you as well as understanding why you're not sort of blowing your horn quite as much as you could. Thank you.
Thanks.
Catherine.
Well, thank you. It's great to see how much work is going on. I just wanted to ask about free access to the sites, and it was good to hear that there has been a focus on that. Is that focus going to be continued to sort of expand as far as possible to make all of these activities as well as sites available to low-income families?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. It's certainly one of our targets is to think about our accessibility and how well we're delivering and removing financial barriers in particular. The sites became part of the municipal fee assistance program halfway through last year, and so we didn't really get to see what that was going to do and the ability to kind of, our ticket prices are very minimal to begin with, but recognizing that even those minimal barriers still exist. So we're tracking closely how much MFAP we get. We do have museum library passes as well that allow site accessibility for free, but we have no intention of stopping our Thursday nights. That's really where we concentrate, and we ensure now that we offer programming on that night as well. So we're activating the museum and also inviting the public to participate in that activation without having a fee be a barrier. And also I should add that our special events, so we had doors open on the weekend that just passed. Last year, the Pump House had 299 participants in Doors Open, and this year we had 410. That is a free day at the museum. We have select free days throughout the season. Canada Day is another. So we intend to continue those. It's always a balance of sort of getting people in and thinking about revenue as well, but certainly that is part of the mandate of any museum, is to think about those removals of barriers.
I have a question. Again, about the pump house. So my family does take advantage of that library pass that is good at not just the pump house, but all the city museums. You have to sign it out from the library, so you might have to wait. But it is available all year round, so if you're here as a resident, you will eventually get access to that pass. We've never had to wait more than a couple weeks. But as you just said, some of the extra programming now, like the Thursday night programming, is like part of this new community outreach sort of approach to using that space more widely and pulling people in. So is this sort of like an ongoing initiative to basically could it go beyond just Thursday nights as it is now? Is there other things in discussion? Like, should we be expecting new programming every year, or what kind of things can we look forward to?
Thank you, and that's a great question. Our team, I would argue, and now I may humble brag a little bit, I think our team is in a very good position now. We've spent the last 2 years really reviewing site operations and thinking about how strategically we can move. And I think now we're seeing that we can now respond to calls for new programming much more efficiently and effectively than we have in the past. So to that end, programming updates will happen annually. We will have core programming that speaks to the core stories at the museum. So the fact that the pump house was a water facility, moving water around the city of Kingston, will always remain part of our programming. But additional programs will match the exhibitions, will match things that arise in the community. And we will always consider which of those should be part of a fee relief, if you will, so that we can enhance accessibility. And we do this at both sites. I just want to point that out. So Fortnight at the Pump House, the Thursday night experience, is coupled with Campfire music series at the McLaughlin. So you can go to the McLaughlin, have campfire, use the workshop, local artists will perform, you can make s'mores. And again, these are very targeted to bringing in new groups and new families. And I should also give a shout out to the other museums in the community on this regard. Our free nights on Thursdays come out of really an Ontario-wide initiative, which was called Loud Nights or Loud Days at museums. These were intended to be particularly open to children and families at no or low cost, so that children were able to yell, essentially. So you could come into a museum like the AGO, you could be quite loud, you could run around, you could do all of the things that people don't traditionally think of in museum spaces. That rollout of Loud Nights in the city was organized through CAM to happen on Thursdays. And so our continued participation in that does mirror this sort of sense that this is the day of the week where our museums become very accessible as a city. And if you noticed in the news recently, Montreal did this very different scale, but with tremendous success, where they had a day where every museum in Montreal was free, and the subscription to that was tremendous. And so, yeah, there's a precedent, and I think certainly a commitment going forward to not only updating programming, but keeping it accessible or as accessible as we can.
That's great, and very exciting things happening with museums, and thank you for that. Catherine?
Sorry, just a follow-up I was asking, and thinking particularly about the McLaughlin Woodworking Museum, which of course is out there geographically. And so to actually encourage people who have, serious financial limitations, is there any thought about how it might be possible to get people there physically rather than under their own steam? I mean, a lot of people don't have cars, for instance.
Thank you. That is the largest challenges that we face with the McLaughlin. It is also that is the most easterly reaching museum in the city of Kingston, held by the city or otherwise. So there's a lot of parts of it that compel us, and also a lot of challenges that face us in transportation is one of the dominant. One conversation we have been having is with the trolley tours. And we've joined this year the educational trolley package, which allows school groups to book their educational package for the McLaughlin, and then they actually can take the trolley there as part of the package, so it reduces their cost for busing. That's targeted at children's and school groups. We don't yet have a strategy where we have the ability to bus people to the site, et cetera, though it is certainly something that we can consider. Are there days perhaps where we could supply that kind of transit? It's certainly a possibility, but not one that we've kind of costed yet.
Okay, great. Most interesting. So the recommendation is in the package. Yes, before we move it, members of the public have a chance, thank you, James, have a chance to ask questions or make comments. So you just have to identify yourself as a resident and go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Frank Dixon. Thank you, Dr. Campbell, for the presentation. Learned a lot from this, and I want to commend you and your staff for the tremendous work you've been doing in Kingston in this area. I think it's a great addition to the overall cultural fabric of the city. So, if the chair would suffer me a little bit, I have some suggestions on things you could be working on. Is that in order, Mr. Chair? Or?
You can make comment. You have a total of 5 minutes.
All right. So next, in 2 years, in 2020, we're going to be having a bicentennial of the birth of Sir Oliver Mowat, who was Premier of Ontario from 1872 to 1896 and also Attorney General of Ontario. Born in Kingston, he apprenticed at law with Sir John A. Macdonald. And I don't see anything on him in City Hall. He didn't ever serve as an MPP for Kingston. He moved away after a quarrel with Macdonald. I think he was the MPP for Oxford, sort of in Western Ontario, but I think he's very significant past Kingstonian. I would like to see some work done on him and displayed in some way in City Hall at that time. So that's just my suggestion. I'm always very impressed with how you use the space in this building to highlight all of the interesting things that have happened here. And you have the 2 rooms converted downstairs, which I think are very successful. And I have a couple suggestions sort of in that regard. I was down in Toronto visiting their City Hall, and they have some very interesting things. Of course, it's a lot bigger building, it's a lot bigger city. But one thing they've got is a chain of history of the governance of Toronto and its parts, the parts that are now amalgamated into Toronto right from the start, I guess 1834 or so. So that's something that's very interesting, because we don't have anything on Kingston Township at all. You can't get at that information. It was merged into Kingston, Pittsburgh Township also. And something else that they have, which I really like that we don't really have, is a prominent display of a photograph of the mayor and the current council. They've got that right there outside the mayor's office. So I know that it's up in sort of an out-of-way room upstairs. So those would be my suggestions. And again, I want to commend you for your work.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to ask questions or offer comment on this year-end report 2017 Civic Museums? Okay, seeing none, you need a mover and a seconder for the recommendation, which you see in your package. Moved by Mac, seconded by Councillor Schell, that Heritage Kingston recommend to Council that the 2017 Civic Museums year-end report attached as Exhibit A be received and approved in recognition of the role Heritage Kingston plays as an advisory committee to Council that includes oversight of the two city-owned museums, the McLaughlin and the Pump House, as well as Kingston City Hall, National Historic Site, and the Civic Collection. Any comment on the report? Okay, yes, Councillor Schell.
Well, encouraging it is to see under the expert management that has taken over. It's really very exciting. I find we've been going to the museums a lot more now. And they're very, very good to go to, exciting, interesting, and congratulations. Thank you.
I'm just going to put a plug for the current exhibit, the Leonardo exhibit. I was there at the opening and I brought my son with me, and he's into science. He's 10 years old, and I think he might end up being a scientist one day, like my father. But he was absolutely fascinated with the engineering exhibits there, and I was actually quite impressed with the how elaborate some of the pieces were. Exceeded my expectations. Everybody's excited about something to do with Leonardo, but I really would recommend anyone that hasn't been yet to go check it out, and keep up the good work. All right, we will vote on the recommendation. All those in favor? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. There are no items in the next two placeholder agenda pieces. The next one we have something in is statutory business. There, as usual, are several heritage permits in the works. And as they come along, I'll be reminding you if it's Part 5 or Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. And we've also got staff here to introduce each one. So the first one is 81 to 83 King Street East, which is a Part 5 application. Go ahead.
All right. Good morning, everyone. So this is a really big one, and I'm going to try and keep it as brief as I can in hopes that you have had a chance to review the staff report. But I do want to go over the proposal and sort of point out certain specific elements and just make sure everyone does have a good understanding before we move forward into the discussion. So an application for alteration and demolition under Section 42 of the Ontario Heritage Act has been submitted to gain heritage approval to rehabilitate 81 King Street East from a multi-unit dwelling to a single-unit dwelling. The subject property is located on the south side of King Street, opposite City Park at the corner of King and Maitland. 81 King occupies a very prominent position on King Street East and is integral to the streetscape character and in framing City Park's southern boundary. The subject property is designated under both Parts 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act and Part 5 as part of the Old Sydenham Heritage Conservation District. Originally a large brick house constructed circa 1841, the building was substantially enlarged and renovated in about 1886 into a 3-story residence and remodeled in the Queen Anne style. We believe this was likely by William Newlands, this renovation. The property is identified as significant to the Old Sydenham HCD, and both the HCD study and bylaw note the uniqueness of this property. Specifically, the property inventory evaluation form notes that the design of this remodeled early dwelling, as well as its site, well back from the street, serves as an interesting contrast to the other buildings in the streetscape. Bylaw 8465 does not provide a list of heritage attributes for this property, and consequently, a draft list of attributes is included in the heritage impact statement that was submitted as part of the application. The draft list of attributes is quite extensive, and I won't go over all of them, but you can refer to Exhibit D of the staff report. I do, however, just want to highlight the fact that most of the attributes in the draft statement relate to the north elevation, the architectural detailing, and the roofscape overall, and that the proposal before you does seek to preserve and restore the majority of these attributes. So, for example, the complex main roof line of cross gables, hips, and dormers, the projecting bracketed upper stories, each defined by its timber and pargeted base belt course in the west block. And what I have done is I'll just go through, and where there are 3 attributes that are in the draft list that are affected, I've highlighted them in red just to draw your attention to them. So there is some impact to some original windows on the rear elevation to the south, but the 2 lost in terms of heritage attributes are in the west elevation, which is the dormer on the west elevation, as well as the balcony on the west elevation. So the proposal includes the rehabilitation of this residence from a multi-unit dwelling to a single-unit dwelling, and involves a combination of conservation treatments. These include preservation and restoration of the original house, as well as selective demolition and the construction of additions as part of the rehabilitation process. The image in front of you is the most up-to-date rendering we have of the proposed material and color palette. However, I just want to highlight that the color scheme is not yet finalized, and staff have included a condition in our recommendation relating to the details of this finalized scheme. Essentially, the color scheme is really crucial in retaining a visual appreciation of the form and massing of the original historic building and its exceptional detailing in relation to the proposed new additions that are before you. Cumulatively, the proposed alterations and demolition will have a significant impact on the cultural heritage value of the property and character of the Sydenham HCD. In evaluating this impact, staff have assessed the proposed alterations and additions against the existing heritage policy framework. So this includes the old Sydenham HCD plan, the City of Kingston official plan, the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Sports 8 guiding principles for the conservation of heritage buildings, and lastly, Parks Canada's standards and guidelines for the conservation of historic places in Canada. So from the very beginning, this has been a very iterative design process. So at an early stage, staff identified the challenging elements of this proposal. For example, the loss of some heritage attributes and the significant additions. As well as staff throughout the process provided verbal and written feedback, and back and forth as revisions came through to us, we continued to provide feedback. A pre-consultation session was held with Heritage Kingston on May 16th, and followed by an informal discussion with about 4 members on the 24th. Staff received written and verbal comments from the committee, which have informed the design throughout the process. We also received written comments from Bruce Downey on behalf of Stephen Sorensen at 85 King Street East, which are attached as correspondence to the agenda. The applicants have been very receptive to the constructive feedback, and many significant changes have been made to the original proposal. So I just want to point out a few of the significant changes that have occurred since we originally viewed the first proposal. Significantly, the redesign of the west elevation, including a lowering of the roof line, a reduction in the width of the addition, and projection of the dormer window, and the application of detailing reflecting the Queen Anne style, all of which these modifications help to minimize the perceived scale and massing. We also saw a removal and simplification of decorative detailing on the garage addition, the removal of cresting on all the ridges and restricting it only to original ridges on the principal building, a reduction in the number and height of fence and piers, and a change in the material of them, as well as a retention of the 1886 rough cast stucco on the principal building. So in order to orient everyone, I just want to put before you a site plan and highlight. So essentially, the blue lines represent the existing footprint of the original building, and the red indicates where there are changes to the footprint and/or an expansion to the footprint. So in brief, the application proposes the preservation and restoration of the original north elevation and the rehabilitation of the west, south, and east. So this bird's eye view, although unlikely to ever be experienced by a pedestrian, is helpful in understanding the proposal in its entirety. And as we briefly move through the proposed alterations and demolition, I just want to remind you that, and to remember that this property is unique, and it represents a departure from the historic pattern and development in the old Sydenham ward, and that this departure is actually intrinsic to its cultural heritage value and the contribution it makes. Okay, so starting with the north elevation, and As existing, this elevation has the greatest level of integrity in terms of its original composition and architectural detailing, and it has experienced the least alteration in comparison to the west and south elevations. It is also the principal facade contributing to the character of the King Street corridor as identified in the plan. As a consequence, the preservation and restoration of this elevation is viewed as critical to the enhancement of the heritage attributes of the property and the contribution it makes to the HCD. Alterations to the front largely involve preservation and restoration treatments, with the exception of 3 new additions, which are a new veranda, a garage addition, and a 1.5-story addition connecting the east historic addition to the garage. The proposal involves extensive preservation and restoration work to original windows, doors, materials, architectural detailing, and the 3 original significantly large chimneys on the front elevation, including the veranda. This is significant conservation work and will provide real enhancements to the cultural heritage value of the property and district. There has been much debate on the authentic preservation and restoration approach to this elevation. For example, there's a proposal to include a 4th window on the 2nd floor, and we have conditioned this detail in terms of further evidence to confirm that there was a 4th window in that location. So I'm just going to go back to the rendering because it helps us to understand the materials and colors. In terms of materials, the proposal includes preservation and restoration of the existing material palette. And in terms of the 3 new additions, they'll be including a buff brick, limestone foundation, and quoins. And essentially the detailing on all the new additions before you will reference the original detailing in terms of form and proportions, but utilize a simplified detail. And this is intended to serve as a visual distinction between the existing building and the new construction. I'm just going to speed through some of this as well in terms of timing. Will someone call me if I'm taking up too much time? Okay, because this is intended to be helpful. So in terms of additions on the front, the veranda addition, section 5.4.3 of the plan, speaks to the appropriateness of new verandas on existing buildings, provided that historical evidence and sufficient documentation concerning the materials exists. We do have evidence on the 19th and early 20th century fire insurance plans of a curved veranda at the northwest corner, as well as a veranda extending east from the main porch. This application proposes the reinstatement of the corner veranda that is documented on the fire insurance plan, but also proposes a new section of verandas to connect it to the main porch. The new veranda is proposed to match the existing in form and proportions, but with a simplified decorative detailing so as to distinguish it from the original. The 1.5-story, the 1.5-story brick addition connecting the historic east addition to the new garage is in keeping with the HCD plan's policies on new additions. This new addition necessitates the removal of the existing single-story connection, but this is a more recent addition. Essentially, the removal of this addition and the replacement with the new 1.5-story addition will have a neutral impact on the cultural heritage value of the property. The new addition is set back from the existing front facade, and the roof line is slightly lower than the existing historic east addition, helping it to read as secondary to the main building. The extension of the garage northwards with a raised roof will bring the garage forward of the front elevation and is a substantial alteration to the property. Section 5.4.1 of the plan states that garage or carport additions are discouraged. In assessing the impact of this garage addition and whether its design will conserve the cultural heritage value of the property and the district, staff have considered the setting of the property, the unique size of the front yard and the location of the existing dwelling, the proposed location, setback, and orientation of the garage addition, the height of the garage, the proposed vegetative screening, the location and massing of adjacent buildings, and the design of the garage itself. It is important to note that the proposal includes the preservation of the original stone walls at the south and east of the existing garage and coach house. The proposed garage is located at the southeast corner of the front yard and is oriented with the garage doors facing west. This orientation will lessen the impact of its massing on King Street East by minimizing the massing of the building facing the street and directing the majority of the building westwards, thereby framing the front yard courtyard. The westward facing wall is delineated by garage doors and dormer windows. And although not in the old Sydenham HCD, there is historical precedence for the positioning of a carriage house to frame a front courtyard with the main house. In this instance, the generously sized front yard, the siting of the principal building, and the proposed siting and orientation of the garage support this traditional arrangement. It's important to note that the design of the garage has evolved considerably in response to comments from staff and members of the committee, particularly as they relate to the overly decorative treatment of a secondary building. As a result, the architectural detailing has been simplified and now reads as secondary to the principal building and complies with the policies and plan design guidelines of the plan. Staff recognize that garage additions are generally incompatible with the character of the district and that this proposal is an exception to the rule. Fundamentally, the subject property's layout and configuration does not follow the historic pattern of development in the Old Sydenham ward, which is inherently part of its cultural value. The design and siting of the enlarged garage is compatible with the architectural style of the existing building and the setting of the property and will serve to reinforce the eccentricity of this property and the contribution it makes to the Old Sydenham ward. So moving over to the west elevation, this elevation has experienced the most alterations since the 1886 remodeling. The 1930s one-story addition obscured original detailing and negatively impacted the elevation's architectural composition. More recent alterations relating to fire safety included the erection of fire escapes and fire shutters. A lack of maintenance also led to the deterioration of existing heritage attributes, including the balcony and dormer window. As a result, the integrity of this design has been greatly reduced. The proposal in the west elevation includes the demolition of two heritage attributes, in other words, the second-story porch and the third-story dormer window, and the erection of a new 2.5-story brick addition with dormer windows on the northwest and south roofs, and a 2-story bay window in the west elevation. The design of this elevation has been the subject of detailed discussions with the owners, architect, and heritage consultant, and many options have been explored. In assessing the proposed alterations, staff have reviewed the current condition and integrity of the elevation and its heritage attributes, the information provided in the heritage impact statement, and the appropriateness of the new addition's design against applicable policies and design guidelines in the HCD plan. The design of this addition has evolved considerably from the first iteration submitted to staff. Staff and the members of Heritage Kingston have provided comments in relation to the HCD plan's guidelines for new additions. Important changes to the initial design include a lowering of the roof line to maintain the existing ridgeline height, a reduction in the width of the addition, and a reduction in the projection of the dormer window on the west elevation. All of these help to reduce the overall massing of the building and roof, making it read as secondary to the principal building. The application of detailing that reflects the Queen Anne style also helps to minimize the scale and massing of the addition. As proposed, the new addition largely complies with the intent and policies of the plan, and although a large addition, it will clearly read as secondary in terms of its size through the stepping down in height from the main roof ridge line. The proposed addition does entail the removal of two attributes, and it is an irreversible change to the original building, which does not support this policy 5.2.2, which states the construction of additions should not entail removal, covering, or other adverse impacts on heritage attributes or other important architectural features of the building. However, given the existing integrity of this elevation, the design of the proposed addition, and the heritage conservation goals of the whole project, on balance, this loss is acceptable from a cultural and built heritage perspective. So similar to the west elevation, the south elevation has experienced significant alteration. Again, the 1920s, 30s ground floor addition obscured original openings, and many of the original windows have been replaced. In most instances, rear elevations are largely invisible from the public viewing. However, in this instance, the siting of 81 King Street in relation to an adjacent parking lot to the south makes the south elevation quite visible from Maitland Street. Taking this into account, a thoughtfully designed elevation that ties into the west elevation and the Queen Anne style architecture is essential and will help to enhance the overall contribution of the property to the district. As proposed, the alterations and limited demolition do comply with the relevant sections of the HCD plan and will provide a more coherent design that is compatible with the existing architecture. The proposal includes the demolition of the ground floor addition, the removal of fire escape and fire shutters, and the erection of a 2.5-story addition extending southwards to existing ground floor footprint. The proposal also includes the construction of a 2-story stair tower forward of the existing 3-story gable with the relocated and restored historic stained glass window, a new veranda on the 1st story, and the relocation and rebuilt veranda from the west elevation on the 2nd story of the gable. The new additions read as secondary to the principal building in terms of their height and massing, and the proposed materials of buff brick, rough cast stucco, and limestone coins and architectural detailing are complementary to, yet distinguishable from, the existing building. The historic stained glass window on the 2nd story of the 3-story gable is in poor condition and currently held in place by a makeshift structure of perspex sheets. As noted in the Heritage Impact Statement, given the need to fully remove it and substantially rebuild it, its relocation to the new stair tower is seen on balance as an acceptable approach. A condition has also been included in our recommendation to document the stained glass in its original location prior to removal. All the windows on this elevation are in poor condition and have been replaced with unsympathetic replacements, and as a result, the application does propose all new aluminum-clad windows. The proposal complies with the city's policy on window renovations in heritage buildings. So in terms of the east elevation, there aren't many changes to be seen here. I just want to draw your attention to the changes in the rear roof line as well as the garage addition. So in terms of landscaping, the proposal introduces enhancements to the existing layout and design, including new plantings, the preservation of existing trees. These features will enhance the existing high-quality landscape character of the King Street corridor. The proposal does also include the installation of perimeter fencing in the form of decorative metal railings and limestone piers, which is in keeping with other similar fencing in the Old Sydenham ward. At the rear, a privacy screen constructed of wood and steel is proposed to be affixed to a new concrete coping at the top of the existing historic stone wall. Staff are comfortable with the appearance of the privacy screen, but have included a condition requiring the submission of details from an engineer demonstrating that the additional load will not harm the structural integrity of this wall. So in summary, this proposal has presented a variety of benefits and challenges. Essentially, it does provide necessary repair and restoration work that will serve to protect many of the heritage attributes of the property over the long term. It also introduces a new layer of high-quality architecture on a property which has historically undergone multiple instances of substantial renovation and alteration. It does involve the loss of several heritage attributes that we have spoken of. This proposal has benefited from multiple rounds of technical review, which have led to changes in the original and subsequent design of the project, as I've described throughout the presentation. Staff do acknowledge that the proposal necessitates the loss of identified heritage attributes. However, these losses come with the conservation of a number of heritage attributes which have been compromised over time. Overall, the benefits to be achieved through the execution of the proposed alterations will uphold the objectives of the Old Sydenham HCD plan, as well as the broader objectives of the City of Kingston. On balance, the overall enhancements to the cultural heritage value of the property and to the Old Sydenham HCD outweigh the loss of the aforementioned heritage attributes. Ultimately, this proposal will conserve a significant heritage property in the city by implementing necessary repair and conservation work in tandem with the introduction of construction and additions that complement the existing heritage style of the building. So with that, I'm going to leave you with staff's recommendation. And I do want to draw your attention to condition 12, because essentially I've spoken a lot in this presentation about on balance and accepting the certain loss of two heritage attributes on balance with the broader conservation work. But part and parcel of that is ensuring that the city and the community have confidence that that significant conservation work will be undertaken. So we have included a condition that the owner will enter into a heritage easement agreement with the city. And this is, in a sense, a way to ensure the phasing of the work so that the on-balance approach does occur. Right. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation. And I did not actually time it because I was sort of thinking that the subject matter needed to be covered, and I'm satisfied that you did that. Okay, so just to remind everyone on the procedure, Part 5, it's the same procedure every time. You members of the committee confirm that their comments that they made through Dash were correctly captured, and then members of the public are allowed to make comment, and then members of the committee are allowed to make comment that gets added to the record on top of the written comments that we've already added. And that's it, and then we vote on the recommendation. I'll just ask the clerk this next question. Should a member suggest an amendment or a removal of some part of the recommendation, is that permitted in the Part 5 procedure?
No, it is not. Only the committee is only able to support or to not support the recommendation, and it's up to council to make those determinations.
Right, so just to further explain that, because we're used to it because we've been dealing with these permits for a couple of years and the new Part 5 procedures. The committee underwent a restructuring a couple of years ago, and so those who've not partaken in a Part 5 process since that time may not be aware of this fact, but it's council makes a decision and we make a recommendation whether they should support or deny. So our recommendation, in a sense, is not binding. because it's council that makes the decision. We are an advisory group to council on Part 5. So Part 5 is anything in a Heritage Conservation District. The intent is that the Heritage Conservation District is written in such a way that staff can interpret it and that council can look at all the pros and cons in their final decision to say yay or nay. It becomes a yay or nay question for council at the time it comes up. And so, because it can often be complex, our advice is very useful to them, and our comments that we make is available to all councillors and members of the public to explain the eventual decision. So that's it. So basically, we're populating the file with our comments and explaining the reason for our advice, whatever that might be. But as far as sort of altering the course of the recommendation, we're not permitted to do that. That's just the way the Heritage Act is written. Okay, so with that said, we go to members of the committee. If you made comments in Dash, which I believe is Dawn and Jane, were they captured correctly? Yes, they were. Okay, second phase is members of the public are allowed to submit comments. Each member has 5 minutes. You get one chance to make a submission. It is not a conversation, that it doesn't go back and forth, and staff does not answer each submission. You just make your comments. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to staff for the presentation. I think this is the best research and set of drawings I've ever seen at this committee. Really outstanding. Want to commend that. And I'm happy to see this project proposed as a restoration for this very interesting building, because I think as a heritage asset, it had gone downhill. So it's now on its way back up, and I wish everyone the very best.
Thank you, Mr. Dixon. Is there anyone else from the public that wishes to speak? Please identify yourself, and you have 5 minutes.
Okay, now, my name is Bruce Downey, and I also want to thank the presentation. It's a very thorough presentation. The report's quite extensive, thorough, clearly written, included a whole series of comments, and the presentation that was put forward is quite a beautiful one, as was commented by the previous speaker. It shows quite a fascinating building on King Street, and the imagery that was included in the report of Tudorish Bavarian mansions on rocky outcrops was pretty breathtaking. I could almost feel the firs and hear the roaring fire. But it's not Sydenhamore, and it's not this area. And so even though it's been beautifully rendered and set up, that is something that needs to be borne in mind here. I realize that in horse training terms, this building had been ridden hard and put away wet. It was running down. I had tried to assist the previous owner in some aspects of it periodically. He seemed to have very little interest in spending any money on it, and there was rot occurring everywhere, as the new owners are going to discover, if they haven't already. But what is being presented here is not a restoration of this project, but an engulfing of this building. It's totally encapsulated in new structures, and each elevation looks phenomenally different. I met with the city planners related to this, and said that I was focusing primarily on the garage, which I will. But in looking at it, I copied an original picture and a proposed picture of each elevation, and it's very difficult to recognize this as the same building. It is not the same building, and it's probably what the new owners would like it to be, not the same building. But from a heritage standpoint, and what we have in Sydenhamore, it's been mentioned a number of times in the presentation today, the unique quality of this building, the unique quality of this site, and that will be gone. I'm an architect. I've practiced architecture here for 40 years. I sat in this committee for 30 years. I worked extensively in heritage properties. I focus on design. I understand design. I understand what makes a heritage property tick. I don't rely totally on the fabric. That old board is in this building, it means this building's old. No, that's not a particular case. A lot of people think if you have columns out front of a building, then you have some sort of mansion in southern Mississippi. It's not the same. It's the DNA or the elements of a building and a site that make it historical are unique and intrinsic to that site and to this neighborhood. And what is happening to this building is definitely a transformation. And I think it should be borne in mind as to what that transformation, what is happening in that transformation beyond the beauty of the documents that we're looking at. The part that I really want to speak to, which was the garage, is that in any discussions that I've had with the owners who were good enough to visit or with the planners, there was an allude to options or other considerations or other things that happened. The garage is in the front yard of this building. It's not off Maitland Street, where it could be. It's not an extension of the existing garages, which it could be. It's placed as a separate 1.5-story small house in the front yard of this building. Flies in the face of absolutely every principle and guideline that heritage properties follow. Every guideline that's in Sydenham. And their view, well, this
30
creates
seconds.
Beg your pardon? 30 seconds. So I think what you really need to be looking for is authenticity. I'm not suggesting that there shouldn't be a garage. I'm not suggesting changes shouldn't be made. I'm suggesting that they should look at options, that they have options, that you go beyond the beauty and you look for the options that do not place that garage in the front yard of this building.
Thank you. Any other members of the public? So as usual, you identify yourself and you have 5 minutes.
My name is Robert Chagas. I'm the solicitor for Stephen Sorensen, who's the abutting landowner to the east. I, as well, as Mr. Downey has said, applaud these owners and their efforts and what their vision is for the property. But I have to say that I'm a little astounded of the irony today that, as you heard, there's a provision in this recommendation that says we're not sure if we're going to allow this additional window on the second story until we do some more research and we find out that there was one. And yet, unprecedented, we're putting a 40-foot extension of a garage into the front yard that has never, ever existed. And there's no discussion whatsoever on that, except that, well, it's an eccentric building. Well, I believe that there are options, and historically, the existing garage has a lot more merit than I think what it's been given to date. As the planning report says, the extension of the garage northward with a raised roof will bring the garage forward of the front elevation and is a substantial alteration to the property. Section 5.4.1, additions to heritage properties general of the HCD plan states, garage or carport additions are discouraged. In Mr. Scheinman's report, that's part of your report, he provided some historical mapping for the property. On page 93 of your report, he shows two figures, the Watson House at that time in 1865 and Watson's cottage that's from Brosius in 1875. I think that the important thing to look at that in both instances, the existing garage is shown, or its predecessor, and most importantly, it's behind the north facade of the existing structure. It's behind. It was behind in 1865. It was behind in 1875. If you flip one page back, there's the 1908 insurance atlas showing again that it's set behind the front facade. Mr. Scheinman says, despite the long period of recognition, no statement of cultural heritage value has yet been developed. And then he refers to the designation bylaw and the HCD inventory, and he says that they're quite vague on the matter. And I disagree, because when admittedly in the designating bylaw, I admit that that's vague, because the reason for designation is basically the design as well as the site created added interest in the streetscape. When you get to the actual inventory, there's two provisions that this proposal is taking away. The ridge of the gable roof runs parallel to King Street, and there are large gabled projections on both the front and back towards Maitland Street. Well, putting the 40-foot garage is going to, there's no way that one can maintain the structural integrity of the gabled roof with it now going perpendicular to it. But more importantly, at the very back of it, it says, when it's talking about the limestone wall at the rear, it says, as it approaches a stable building extending from the back of 83 King, the stable has side gable roof with large wood doors spanning its southwest face. A second half story contains a projecting dormer with paired 1-1 windows. That's in the inventory, and this proposal throws that right out the window. Sure, it saves the limestone walls for the garage. That's all that it does. And so I think the most important thing in Mr. Scheinman's analysis, when he said, well, this is a major transformation and will predominantly affect the interior, and it's not unusual that an owner making the property their family home would wish to effect certain external changes when they feel which they feel to make it their place, both functionally and emotionally. When the property also happens to be a heritage building, the balance must be struck between the owner's vision and the preservation of those aspects of the building that are considered to be essential to its heritage character and thus the public interest. Well, with respect to the city planner, there are 4 heritage provisions that are going to be lost by this proposal. The complex main roof line on the cross gables, hips, and dormers will be affected by having a new
30 seconds.
A new roof come out perpendicular. The stepping back of the facade planes from west to east, well, that's going to be entirely blown out. This is the most important one. The stone walls and general volume of the existing garage, which may have originated during the Watkins area, that'll be lost. And lastly, and what has been emphasized in everything you read, the deep setback from King Street, large front yard, will now have a 40-foot improvement on it that is more befitting Bay Ridge than it is Sydenhamore. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chagas. Anyone else from the public wish to speak? Please. You can come to any of these. You can sit any of these ones here. Yeah, and anywhere with a microphone.
Perfect. Thank you. My name's Mark Derbyshire. I've met many of you on many occasions, the owner of 81 King Street East. Just some added clarification from the information that was maybe shared by Mr. Sorensen's 2 hired representatives as I've said to you on many occasions, this is a house that my wife and I fell in love with, literally in love with 25 years ago. It's been a house that we've admired from afar and are excited to be in an opportunity to be a part of its next chapter. And so the integrity of this house has been very important to us in everything that we've done, to the extent that we've hired Andre Scheinman, who we believed who started with us at the very beginning, who we believe to be the foremost authority in his space, one of them, but really a true professional that was able to help guide us and counsel us and take us through the journey. I mean, this house has very little pictures, very little documentations, given that it's been in a rental unit now for almost 90 years. So we've always strived for that integrity in our design, in working with you and with Andre, and the consultative process that Alex spoke about has been very key to us through this. We've learned a lot through the process, and we've gone through many iterations and lots of variations as to how it would come together and how it would work. And I think what we've created together really does speak to that integrity. And there's been a lot of discussion this morning on the garage. And Andre Scheinman sent me an email that, if I could, it's a very short email, it'd take me about a minute. Are you comfortable, Mr. Chairman, if I read that?
You have 5 minutes and you can read something else.
Very good. So his email, and I'll take it verbatim here, is, "Hi Mark, some comments and critiques from the above," and this is in reference to the letter from Mr. Downing that's included in your package. "In Bruce's analysis of the site building configuration, he seems to have not taken into account the fact that 81 Kings setback is virtually unique in the area, and unlike 85 and most other structures in the area, has really no rear yard to speak of. This point is critical for many reasons. Firstly, you can't make a comparison between its site configuration and what is typical for the area. It also means the extension of the garage is much less in your face than if it were closer to the street. Bruce mentions the courtyard being more common in rural settings, but the deep setback of 81 is again more of a rural type treatment, as originally was a country estate, and thus the courtyard more a reasonable natural fit. Bruce is critical of the vegetation screening, but this is a typical mitigation measure, not necessarily in the case to hide poor design, but to rather to continue to de-emphasize the garage relative to the house. While the corner location does mean the lot can be viewed from the northwest and the west, it is still the view directly from the north that is of the greatest significance. He talks about it being iconic, about, it seems ironic to be talking about the creating of dividing lines between properties which never existed, when the client of Mr. Downing's is building an 8-foot wall that never also historically existed. And so he concludes with, as you know, and as you commented in his work, that it was not our first approach to have the garage extend out. But relative to the whole project, and given that no other solution worked and all the variations we went through, that he doesn't see the extended garage with such a deep setback posing a problem. And so he sent that through in response to the letter. And I just wanted to share that with you today.
1 minute.
And that certainly the integrity and all the designs we've gone through have been paramount in all of our thinking and really restoring this wonderful, wonderful property. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Derbyshire. And the clerk tells me that because that was a letter that you just wrote, it can be added to the file if you just forward that same letter to Mr. Newman, and it will be part of the file that goes to council. Any other members of the public? Okay, so now it's members of the committee can make comments. It's the same format. You have 5 minutes each. The clerk basically takes dictation, gets your notes down, unless you've prepared comments in writing, in which case you can also forward it to the clerk, and he will use that to put your comments in the file. Who would like to go first? Don.
Well, it's a big, and there's been a lot of work done on it. I really would like to commend the owners for their commitment and enthusiasm for this project, and Heritage staff for all the work they've done between the owners and with this committee to try to come to an appropriate recommendation. And briefly, I appreciate many of all the comments really that Mr. Downey made. I think members of the committee would always prefer to have fewer alterations, fewer losses of heritage attributes. But and we are concerned about the changes to the massing and the roof line and the garage. But as we all know, I think everybody knows, this business is a question of finding balance, finding compromise. And I think we have to balance the alternatives to the proposed design. One of the, what we see very often in the Heritage District is that the only way necessary repairs are done to a building of this nature is, significant additions for more space and so on, and in many cases, severances for a separate new building. And this is a big lot. And the people who are concerned about one corner of this lot being lost by the garage should be aware of the possibility that there could be an application from a different owner for a severance and a new building on that front portion. We have seen this on Gore Street, on Sydenham Street, of new major additions that have really detracted from the Heritage Building. So to me, the garage is acceptable. I'm very satisfied with the way that the owners have responded to our suggestions, and so I have no trouble supporting the recommendation. I guess, it's still not perfect, perhaps, or maybe one or two things we'd like to see changed, but I'm confident that the procedure we're following is a good one. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Who would like to go next? Mac.
I agree mainly with what Don had said there, and Andre's comment about. I mean, I think a garage is a very acceptable and necessary part for someone trying to take a building like this back into single family. I think it's quite understandable, and there really isn't room in behind. The building is set back, as Andre pointed out, way back from the street, as opposed to the ones neighboring it that come right out to the front. And I think from the north elevation, you see a gable similar to what is on the gable of that garage now. So I mean, I would rather see the garage in behind. Yes. Is there room here to do it? I don't think there is. I think with the landscaping and so forth, I think it'll tie in nicely. It'll be a lot nicer than what's happening in that building. There won't be 20 cars parked in the front lawn. And like everyone else, the owners have tried very hard and been very diligent in getting proper advice. So I think the garage is acceptable. Just one very small comment about the front. The colors they showed on the drawing overhead, if those are the colors they're proposing, it just seems that they're kind of blending in a little too much. I wouldn't mind seeing a little bit more color there, just to bring out a little more. I don't want it to look like a circus, but I think could be a little bit of color in there to bring a few of the details out. So I would support the proposal.
Thank you, Mac. Catherine.
Thank you. And as Don was saying, thank you very much for all of the hard work that everybody has done on this project. I have to say that I veer more towards Bruce Downey's position. I think that it is an extraordinary projection into the front of the property. And I think when you were coming along King Street into town, that will be what you see. You will see that projection. You'll see 3 garage doors. I just have also a comment about the perimeter. And this is really in the form of a question. Did it ever have a perimeter wall or a perimeter fence around it? In all of the images and so on that I've noticed, there has been no perimeter fence around it, and it seems a shame to be adding one now. And what is the last? And then the final is again really a question, and it's to do with the roofing material. I don't know what the original roofing material was, but this, what seems to be proposed here seems to be a really significant change from that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Schell, you're next.
Thank you. This is going to be an incredible change for the house. To see it renovated and generally preserved will be very good for the house and in the long run, very good for the city. I do note that the garage basically will end about where the house beside it starts, or where the back end of the house beside it is, because the limestone beside it is so much closer to the street. So in many ways, the limestone beside it has ended by the time this garage starts. That's how incredibly different the two lot configurations are for where the houses are situated. So I can quite happily live with the garage. I know when Mac and I were just having a quick talk about colors, it's page 64 of our package. When you look at that, as opposed to say page 77, 64 shows like all of the beauty of the house and the detailing that is going to be in it and preserved. And I think that's why we sort of go about color. You've got a chance to really enhance the beauty of the house with the colors instead of trying to make some of these gorgeous details just blend in, because it is quite spectacular. So I urge the owners to really think hard about colors and really look at many ways of doing it to make sure that this house pops the way it currently does, in a very sad state, but could do when it's completely renovated. Thank you. It's a great plan, and I thank the new owners. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments? Jane, you're next.
I just want to readdress the pillars, and I did mention it in my submission, but no pillars along King Street on the main pillars have lights, and I would like to suggest that maybe the lighting could be removed, or perhaps subject to heritage staff approval, or dark sky international friendly. Okay.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, I would like to add my comments. I've written them down, and I've actually written another point down during the public submission, so just bear with me. Hopefully this is under 5 minutes. I guess I need to give up the chair, so Mr. Vice Chair, could you take over? And
you have the floor.
And you may want to look at your won't go over time. Okay, so what I've done is I've quoted the HCD, sections of the HCD, and asked the question of whether it's consistent with the HCD, and that's, so there's my quotes, quoting the HCD first and then asking the question and answering it. That's how it goes through the whole comment. So from the old Sydenham HCD, section 2.5.1, and that's this document here that you can get, you can access online or get a copy from staff. So 2.5.1, district as a whole, providing guidance for ongoing maintenance and change so that the heritage attributes of the district are retained and whenever possible enhanced. So this is sort of an overarching principle. So my comment is, does the proposed work retain heritage attributes? Yes. Does the work enhance heritage attributes? Yes. Did the HCD plan provide guidance for change to achieve the above? Yes. Next section, 2.5.2, heritage buildings, fostering continuing use of heritage buildings. So this is the change of use from multiple dwelling to single family. Is the proposed occupancy by a single family rather than multiple tenants more likely to foster continuing use of the heritage building and therefore retention of heritage attributes? Yes, because this family went through the heritage process. However, future tenants may not be aware of the heritage attributes and future rental landlords will have other priorities than preserving heritage. Next section is also from 2.5.2, encouraging retention and restoration of original features of heritage buildings based on archival and pictorial evidence and the assessment provided in the district study, and where feasible, to remove incompatible past alterations made to heritage buildings. Does the proposed work retain original features? Yes. Does the work remove incompatible past alterations? Yes. Next section, 2.5.4, land use. Encouraging alterations and new infill that is compatible with the arrangement, scale, architectural styles, and materials that constitute the district's heritage character. So my comment is, are the proposed addition/infill compatible? And the answer, after several revisions with heritage staff and with committee members, the answer is yes. I have one more section, which I've written out here. You can have this as well. So the section is 6.2.1 from the plan. New buildings should enhance the heritage character of the district. So now I'm talking about the garage. So the garage, this is my comment. The garage extension into the front yard is incompatible with several sections of the HCD and does not enhance the heritage character of the district. I would ask that the applicants consider a redesign consistent with reducing car use, something that I often mention in Sydenham, to remove one of the 3 garage bays. And then my summary of my comments. This file presented a real challenge. The proposed work is very complex, and it was difficult to tie all the details of the alterations directly to aspects of the HCD, which is what the Ontario Heritage Act asks us to do. I participated in the consultation process along with several community members, and I am satisfied that our suggestions were taken into account and also resulted in improvements to the proposed design. One example of an improvement that was a result of my suggestion, the massing of the Western Maitland Street addition was reduced, as was mentioned by staff, so as not to overshadow the remaining heritage attributes of the central section. The excitement of the proponents while participating in the heritage process was palpable, and I'm willing to believe that they sincerely want the work to result in not only an improvement to the overall appearance of the building, but also they're partaking in ongoing maintenance of an important part of the heritage district. This would be further ensured by the easement, which I think is a key condition, the number 12, the heritage easement.
30 seconds. 30.
I'm done. I will support recommendation on this file. Thank you.
In the chair.
Okay, any other committee members' comments? Okay, so we move to the recommendation. So it's heritage permit, that Heritage Kingston supports council's approval of the following, and that the recommendation be forwarded to council on June 26th for consideration. And the recommendation as follows, that alterations and demolition of the property at 8183 King Street East be approved in accordance with the details in the application, which was deemed complete on May 29th, 2018, with said rehabilitation of the residents from a multi-unit dwelling to a single-unit dwelling, which includes repairs, alterations, additions, and selective demolition to the building, and that the approval of the alterations be subject to the following 12 conditions. I'm not going to read all of the conditions. They take up a whole page, next page in the package, but I will read number 12. That the owners shall enter into a heritage easement agreement pursuant to Section 37 of the Ontario Heritage Act, which describes additional stages of alterations in a manner which will ensure that any existing heritage attribute to be impacted or lost as a result of the overall proposal presented in this application does not occur in isolation of the broader enhancements to the cultural heritage of the designated property. Okay, so that's the recommendation. We need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Schell, seconded by Don. So it's a yes or no question. No debate is permitted for part 5. Do we support council's approval of the following? Yes or no? Please vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? And that carries. Thank you. Next up is the heritage permit application for 752 King Street West / 18 Lake Watch Lane. And yeah, no, we'll just keep moving. If staff is ready to introduce the next item. I'll get some water though.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I will try to skim through these quickly for everyone, and if you have any questions, we're certainly available to answer questions. So this property, which I'm sure you are aware of, is at 752 King Street West, on the south side of King Street West, near the village of Portsmouth. It's known as the former Rockwood Asylum, now the Kingston Provincial Campus. It contains a number of heritage buildings and a provincially recognized cultural heritage landscape. And these are some of the buildings that are recognized as part of the former asylum. The building that we're looking at today is at 18 Lake Watch Lane, known as the Powerhouse, and it was built around 1955. In terms of the cultural heritage value of this property, it is a provincially recognized landscape, including a number of limestone buildings from the mid to late 1800s, including the landscape itself, which is a architecturally designed picturesque landscape, including curving lanes, mature trees, etc. It's also a Part 4 designated property under the Heritage Act, specifically the Rockwood Villa and the property itself. And as noted, the 1950 Powers House building is not included as an attribute, and specifically the addition that's subject to today's application was added in 1990, also not noted as an attribute. So what is before you today is an application by Infrastructure Ontario on behalf of the province of Ontario as part of a larger rehabilitation program. And it's to remove, it's an application under Part 4 for demolition, to remove a 4.6 by 8.4 meter addition, the 1990 addition, to the south corner of this building, to allow access to an underground tank and contaminated soils that is to be rehabilitated. So in terms of our review, we have no objection to this removal, as it is not key to the heritage value of the site. Our circulation notes that a building permit is required, and that if there's any meters that need to be removed, to contact Utilities Kingston. And in terms of comments from committee, it was circulated and we received no concerns, so our recommendation is on the screen.
Thank you. So this is a Part 4 application, which means it's the other procedure. So just like any regular agenda item, there's questions from members of the committee first, and then members of the public, and then we move in second and debate the item, and then we pass the item or we oppose the item. Okay, so questions from members of the committee to staff. Yes, Councillor Schell.
Thank you. It just occurred to me, and I don't think it's something that we need to ask proponents to do, but would it be possible to ask once all this goes through, ask whoever's going to be doing the work to inform the condominium next door of what's going on and why? They have had issues with the powerhouse in the last few years as various activities have taken place, including thinking that there was contaminated soil. So they're very alert to anything that goes on in that area. So if they could put a note to the condominium managers or however they want to do it, but I think it would be very helpful for good relations for them to do that. Thank you.
Hey, Councillor. I guess that's more of a comment, but that's all right. Anyone else? Members of the public? Okay, so we'll move the recommendation. Need it moved and seconded. I'll read it and then someone can move it. So that the recommendation be approved and forwarded to council. So we don't support it with Part 4. We actually are the ones that approve or deny the application. council has to ratify it, of course. So the demolition of the property at 752 King Street West be approved in accordance with the details of the application, deemed complete on May 25th, with said demolition to include a 4.6 meter by 8.4 meter brick portion on the southeast corner of the powerhouse, and that the demolition be subject to the following conditions: the standard building permit, and then the approval from Utilities Kingston, if any utility meters require removal. Okay, who wants to move it? Moved by Catherine, seconded by Councillor Schell. Any further comment? Seeing none, we'll call the vote on the application. All those in favor? Opposed? And that carries unanimously. Good luck with the work. Next is the application for a heritage permit. Same location. This is, one sec, it's my mother. I'm just gonna take 1 second.
Shall I begin? Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So yes, this is the same property. It's the Kingston Provincial Campus. Again, a number of heritage buildings on this property. This particular application, however, is not for demolition. It relates to what is known as the paint shop building, which is right close to the water at 36 Lake Watch Lane, to the rear of the large Penrose Asylum building. And this was an accessory building to that use. And as noted, it is an attribute of the site. It is included as one of the buildings of heritage value. It was built around the turn of the century, has been used for a number of purposes, I'm sure, but it's known as the paint shop. The purpose of the application before you is to gain approval to replace the bitumen roof that's on this building now with a steel roof. It'll be a standing seam steel roof that matches the larger complex, sort of a greenish shade. And also this is the little building here, and it's also to add eave troughs to this building, which it doesn't have, including a little downspout on the corner of the building here, which will feed into an existing French drain, and to repair the wood soffits, fascia, brackets, and the like under the eaves of this building. And again, this is part of the larger abatement project that the province is currently undertaking. We have no concerns with this application. This is a significant building, and these works to repair the roof will help improve the longevity of this building and hopefully find a new use for it in the future. In terms of our circulation, if there are any structural repairs, a building permit's required, and the committee noted no comments in their circulation. So our recommendations before you, Mr. Chair.
Great. I was just down there with my family on a walk the other day. So it is questions from members of the committee first to staff. Mac?
I certainly commend this project. The batten roof will last for many, many years. My only slight concern is, and I'm sure they've looked into this, it's a very, very low pitch. And it just seems a little bit low for me for batten roof. I hopefully am incorrect in that, but is there anybody to clarify that for me?
Mr. Chair, we did raise that similar concern with the applicants, and they have they originally were considering going back to the bitumen roof and found a steel roof that they are comfortable will properly relieve the water. So they're comfortable with steel roof. So we're supportive.
Any other questions from members of the committee? Okay, so members of the public.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the presentation. I've also walked by there myself, and I've always wondered about the building. I'm wondering, is it currently being used for anything? And if not, could it be used for something in the future? And second point is, I'll just advocate for a heritage plaque to be installed there to describe the history. Thank you.
We'll see if there's any other comments or questions from members of the public. Yes, please. Remember to identify yourself first.
Hi, I'm Steve Dennis with Fishburne Sheridan Engineering, representing the owner. I'd just like to note that there's been a minor change in the design since this application was submitted. That change is to locate the rainwater leader or downspout to the southeast corner and connect to an existing French drain at that corner. That's a minor change during design development. Thank you.
Thank you. Staff has a chance to respond to the two members of the public. And if you could at least clarify for the committee the status of that last change in the application.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't believe we were specific in the location of the downspout. However, we have a pretty good relationship with the applicant, and as long as it is a sort of grayish, non-dramatic color, I don't think we're too concerned with which side it is. So we have no concerns with that. In terms of the member of the public's comment, I believe the building is empty at the moment. I don't think there is a use. Could it be used in the future? I sure hope so. It's a lovely little building, and we would love to see a new use go in there. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Just remind members of the committee, because this is a Part 4 application, we actually do have the ability to alter the recommendation through amendment. If someone thought we should specify the location of the downspout, for example. But of course, we can also just trust staff to interact with the applicant on small details like that. Okay, so that's all for members of the public. We go then to the recommendation. So we need a mover and a seconder for the following recommendation: that alterations to the property at 7052 King Street West be approved in accordance with the details of the application, deemed complete on May 24th, 2018. Said alterations to include, so there's the new installation of new standing seam metal roof with snow guards, installation of a new metal eaves, troughs, and downspout, and the repair and repainting of all wooden soffits, fascia, freezeboard, and moldings. And there is a condition that you get a building permit. So, who would like to move the recommendation? Moved by Don, seconded by Councillor Schell. So, I don't know if, Mr. Vice Chair, if you're ready to make an amendment, but staff is of the opinion that it might be best to amend the recommendation to include the location of the downspouts. We can also take a recess to get the wording if we want.
I'm not sure Bo's location is exactly, so I'm not sure that it's needed myself.
Okay, well, I'm going to call a brief recess to clarify this so we get the wording right before we vote on it. Thank you. Okay, we're ready to reconvene. A simple amendment here. So, Ms. Vice Chair, I'll ask you to take the chair so I can move an amendment.
Right, you have the floor.
So, after consultation with staff, I am moving that we add the following wording after the word downspout, comma, at the southeast corner of the building.
Fine. Seconder for that amendment? Mac, seconded by Mac. Any discussion? All those in favor? That's carried. Return the chair.
Thank you. So the recommendation has been amended, and so now we need to vote on the amended recommendation. Is there any further discussion? Okay, call the vote on the amended recommendation. All those in favor? Opposed, and that carries. We're moving on to the next heritage permit, which is 8 Star Place. The current time is 11:15. We're trying to finish by noon if possible, at 12:30 at the latest maybe. This is a Part 4 application.
All right. So an application for alteration under Section 33 of the Ontario Heritage Act has been submitted to gain heritage approval to repair and repoint the west gable wall, including repair, repointing, and capping of the parapet stone caps. The proposal also includes the rebuilding and capping of 2 west gable chimneys. So the subject property at 8 Star Place is located south of Highway 2 and north of the St. Lawrence River in the former township of Pittsburgh in the east end of the city of Kingston. The subject property contains a 2-story limestone building, historically known as Sopwell Hall, constructed sometime between 1817 and 1832. 8 Star Place was designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act in 1982 by the former township of Pittsburgh through bylaw number 3082. Sopwell Hall, the first owner, James Mackenzie, the first owner of Sopwell Hall was the commander of the Frontenac, which was the first steamboat to sail on Lake Ontario, so just a fun, interesting fact. And the Sopwell Hall consists of a central 2.5-story block facing north with 2 smaller rectangular wings. I also want to point out that central block has an end gable roof which has 2 double chimneys linked at the base, which are quite defining heritage attributes of the property, as well as the limestone construction. So a site visit was completed on April 25th, and at the time, staff observed signs of dampness on the exterior wall of the west-facing gable. We also noticed the presence of inappropriate modern repointing repairs. And Enoch Hammer's report highlights the key issues causing this water ingress and failure of the masonry elements, which are water entering the chimneys, which do not have caps, as well as the inappropriate modern ribbon-style repointing and a dense Portland cement mortar. Basically, the Portland-based cement mortar is directing water back into the wall face and trapping the moisture on the interior lime-based mortar, which has then become saturated, unable to breathe, and essentially, when the freeze-thaw cycles happen, we get really bad frost jacking of these joints. Serious deterioration is also evident in the bulge on the west-facing wall above the chapel suite roof. So in terms of Enoch Hammer's report, Patrick Jenkins actually puts together a sort of diagnostic of the entire issue of the building on both west-facing gable walls. But in this application, we're simply dealing with the west-facing gable, and that's simply due to the extreme cost and resources necessary to carry out these repairs, so they will be phased. So as proposed, the recommendation is to remove all the dense Portland cement failed mortar joints on the west-facing gable and to repoint with an appropriate lime-based mortar. The 2 chimneys, including a central spandrel, will be photo-documented, measured, cataloged, and rebuilt using appropriate lime-based mortar and capped with vented, low-profile caps, which will either be lead, zinc, or stone-colored painted galvanized sheet metal. All the flues are to be maintained and rebuilt in a manner consistent with the existing components, and additionally, the parapet capstones are to be cleaned, failed joints cut out, and repointed with lime mortar. So essentially, the limestone construction of this property, including these 2 double chimneys on the east and this west gable wall, are significant heritage attributes of the property. The proposed repointing repairs to this wall and chimney are critical to the long-term conservation of the property, both from an aesthetic point and also structurally. And this is an enhancement of the cultural heritage value of the property. So with that, I'm going to leave you a staff's recommendation that the approval be subject to the following conditions, as simply that the masonry works will be completed with the city's policy on masonry restoration on heritage buildings.
So again, Part 4 procedure. Questions from members of the committee about the presentation to staff? Seeing none. Members of the public? Okay, seeing none, we go to the recommendation. Need a mover and a seconder for the following: that alterations to the property 8 Star Place be approved in accordance with the details in the application, deemed complete on May 7th, with said repointing of the west gable wall, including repairing repointing and capping the parapet stone caps and rebuilding and capping the 2 west gable chimneys. And there is one condition that it follows the masonry policy. We need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Mac, seconded by Catherine. Any debate? Yes, Don.
Just a comment, really, that this is an important early house, and in some respects, it's had problems with the stone work in previous years through probably inadequate maintenance. So it is really important that this program that's been started with Enoch's Hammer be continued, and I guess we look forward to further installments of repairs.
Anyone else? Mac?
I'm quite happy Jenkins is doing the work. We know that he'll do quality work and historically correct, and so that's certainly a good sign. He has a good contractor on site.
Great. Anyone else? Okay, so we've moved and seconded the recommendation. We'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? And that carries unanimously. Good luck with the work. The next one is my place of work, my other place of work, Kingston General Hospital. This is part 5, right? It's on the district. That's right, it's outside the district. So it's also part 4.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is Kingston General Hospital as subject property on the south side of Stewart Street, north of King Street West. There are a number of 19th century limestone heritage buildings on this property. The application before us today is dealing with the Watkins Wing, which includes portions of the original building and the Fenwick Operating Theatre. In terms of the cultural heritage value, this is a National Historic Site of Canada. The 1830s main building, the 1860s Watkins Wing, and the 1895 Fenwick Operating Theatre are parts of that national significance. The property served as apartment buildings during Kingston's capital period. It's the oldest public hospital in Canada, and it's associated with a number of prominent people, including Dr. James Sampson. So what is being applied for today is an application for alteration to clean, repoint, repair stones, and to install new copper flashing as necessary in a number of large sections of the building on both the north facing Stewart Street, the west side next to Nickel Wing, the south, and around the operating theater as on the east side. There's a detailed overview of the assessment that was undertaken and the proposed works done by Fishburne Sheridan, which is included in your agenda package, including photos and the like. The most prominent sections are these two facing north on Stewart Street, flanking the original 1830s main entrance, as well as around the operating theater, and these walls that you see above it are also subject to that application. In terms of our review, the works proposed to repair these stones will improve the longevity of this building by restricting penetration to the structure. Staff support the work to conserve this treasured Canadian heritage asset and prominent element of the streetscape. In terms of our review, if work is to incur in the road allowance, an encroachment permit would be required. Our forestry staff noted some protection elements for the root system of the large blue spruce trees that are near Stewart Street, and that's been included as a condition. And when circulated, this committee provided no concerns with this application. So, Mr. Chair, we support approval of it, and the recommendation is before you.
Thank you. I'd just like to commend staff on their thoroughness in one of the council priorities of the tree canopy with the large spruce trees in front. They're actually, I don't know how old, at least 80 years old, but and a rare situation where a tree is taller than a building. So we need questions from members of the committee. Yes, Don.
I don't know if the engineering consultants are here, but I had a question. It's really disturbing how many cracked stones are present in this building. I'm looking at page 246 or 245, 246 as just some examples. And quite a few of those stones probably have to be replaced. My question is whether they think the cracks are a result of poor masonry repairs in the past, that is using hard mortars, or whether the stones used for this particular building are more prone to cracking than those from other areas in Kingston.
So, the staff normally that would answer a question, but if the applicant wants to help with that question, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm Chris Russo with Facilities at Kingston General. I'll try to help with the question. So Watkins is the main part of the hospital, and you've probably seen several phases of projects go through. We did the balconies, we did the roof, and for the most part, the way that building has been repaired in the past has been due to, for the most part, a lack of funding to do maintenance and repairs of this nature. So through a program called HIRF, this Healthcare Infrastructural Renewal, we've been able to do these projects and roll them out. I suspect the stonework that you're talking about, because of previous jobs that we've done, is due to the over-eroding of mortar to the point where it's inside the building. It grows mold. We've had issues with asbestos and had to do asbestos abatement, and it's gone past its life. Once you get that moving around and shifting in water, of course you get freeze-thaw cycles. And that freeze-thaw cycles causes what you're seeing there. So for the most part, Mohammed's here, he's with Fishburne and Sheridan. He's the consultant. He's done most of all the work in terms of the putting Watkins back together and the other buildings that aren't heritage designated. But for the most part, we're going to repair what we can repair, and what we can't repair, we know where there's quarries that can get and shape the stonework that we require. But for the most part, we want to put it back together the way it was. So. And thank you for the healthcare infrastructure money.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from members of the committee? Okay, members of the public? Okay, we need a mover and a seconder for the recommendation, which is that alterations of the property at 76 Stewart Street, Watkins Wing, including the Fenwick Operating Theatre, be approved in accordance with the details described in the application, which was deemed complete on May 22nd, with said alterations to include the cleaning, repointing, and repair of the exterior limestone building. There are 5 conditions. We need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Schell, seconded by Catherine. Any debate? Yes, Catherine.
It isn't a debate. It's just to say, it was so impressive to read the research that has gone into this, and I just wanted to compliment the hospital on undertaking it, because I think it will make sure that everything is done as it should be done in the future.
Thank you. I echo that sentiment. Anyone else? Oh, actually, members of the public, the time has already passed because we've moved the recommendations. It's under debate, so public comment is not permitted at this time. All right, we'll call the vote on the recommendation. All those, oh yes, Councillor Schell, did you want to say that? Okay. Okay, calling the vote. All those in favor? Oppose, and that carries. Next one is, so now we have three Part 5s left, all in Old Sydenham. So we're back to the Part 5 procedure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is a property we've seen a few months ago. This is 18 Maitland Street. It's an interior lot between Maitland and Emily Street, south of King East. It is well set back, accessed by a private driveway, and it is currently a 2.5-story stucco-clad concrete dwelling, built originally in 1942. This is the building view from Maitland Street. So it is a contributing building in the district. It may have be attributed to Colin Drever, architect, and in terms of the King Street sub area, it is a building could be associated with an architect. The views to the lake and surviving stone walls are attributes of this area. The application today is to relocate a door with a window. The door originally was originally on the left recently, and is to be moved to the second bay to the right, and the window that was in that bay is to be added to that far left opening. That is actually the existing window. You'll see in the picture, of course, here that the applicant has started that process as due to some water damage that was coming in, damaging floors on the inside. So he started to move the window and door, and has now ceased until the formal heritage approval has been granted. During our review of this, there was a photograph that was provided by the applicant when they bought the place, or prior to doing the work that they did in 2006. And the original building, as you can see on the screen, looks substantially different than what is there today. This was the little cottage. None of these openings or the second floor was there prior to 2006. As it is today, the upper stories were added, all the doors and windows were added. So this is an application to relocate a door that they added themselves and sourced, and they wish just to make a better flow on the interior and to improve the water problem. So this is the view, the only view really you can see of this from the water. And in our recommendations, we have reviewed this, finding that even though there are some attributions to architect Colin Drever, much of that craftsmanship has been lost and compromised in 2006. We note that this application, this alteration, will have little impact on the character of the district and have no negative impact on the area, and that we support it. The building staff noted in their circulation that a building permit is required, and when committee was circulated, we received no concerns with this application. So we recommend approval, Mr. Chair, and our motion is before you.
Thank you. Questions from, wait a minute, this is part 5. So no one submitted comments through Dash, although several people responded through Dash that they were aware of the application and did not have comment. So we go to members of the public. Seeing none, we go to final comments to be added to the file from members of the committee. Okay, well then I'll call the vote on the recommendation. Yes, we need a mover and a seconder. Remember, this is to support council's approval, so it's part 5 recommendation. Need a mover and a seconder. I know there's only 6 of you to move and second, so you're going to often have Councillor Schell. Moved, seconded by Jane. Okay, so I call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed, and that carries. Now we have 67 Sydenham Street, also in Old Sydenham HCD, part 5.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sure everyone is familiar with this property as well. This is the Annandale apartment complex on Sydenham Street between William and Earl. The complex has been an evolved sort of complex with an 1840s villa on Sydenham Street and various additions over the years. The large complex is around the 1920s. And in terms of its cultural value, it is rated as significant in the Sydenham district. It is attributed to a number of architects, Coverdale, Gage, and Drever, and it's in the Beyond Baggage sub-area and has a number of attributes associated with that part of Sydenham as well. The application today is with respect to gate posts on Earl Street. The gate posts, these are the gate posts here. In terms of our understanding of this property, it is likely that sometime after the former Chalmers Church was removed from the site, which originally sat in this area here, the iron fence iron gate and stone fence that originally graced Sydenham Street appears to have been relocated along Earl Street to extend it further south and re-put in there. The posts, there were limestone posts along Sydenham Street, and it appears that they were all lost over time. And at the same time as that was relocated, it appears that at that time or shortly after, these concrete gate posts and the concrete cap that you see on top of the limestone knee wall were added. And then these gates, possibly one of them is original from Sydenham Street, and the other one is likely a replica. So the application before you today is to rebuild and repair the two gates. They are to be cleaned and painted in a black. The columns are to be removed and recast to match what is existing in concrete. And according to the applicants, the concrete gate posts are in an advanced stage of deterioration. The proposed removal and reconstruction of these structures to match the existing structures in form and profile will conserve this feature in the district and along Earl Street. And we support this application. We did circulate it, of course, and our engineering notes that these gates, while on private property, are very, very close to the city's road allowance, so any equipment that needs to be stored on the road allowance will require an encroachment permit. We circulated to the committee, and your summary of the comments are attached in the agenda package. We did receive one comment from a member to encourage the applicants to consider the use of stone as opposed to the concrete for these gate posts. That was relayed to the applicants. They would prefer concrete, I think simply for cost purposes, but are open to considering it. While staff have no objection to the use of stone and cladding, as it's certainly a common material in Sydenham, we also equally have no concerns with replicating the concrete, as these particular gate posts were never stone. They were always intended to be concrete, so it's a bit of a blend of the newer modernist Annandale complex versus the older character of the area. So our recommendation is for approval, and it's before you on the screen.
Thank you. So this is part 5. You had the opportunity to make comments in dash, and here's your chance to correct that. Seeing none. Members of the public have a chance to make comment on this file. Seeing none. Final comments can go into the file before we vote. Anyone wish to do so? Don.
Yeah, I just want to sort of extend the comments I made in dash. I was a bit surprised that the use of concrete is considered good here. I don't, concrete is not a standard material for gate posts in the district, and it's not mentioned as recommended in the district guidelines. There seems to be a feeling that because the present ones, the existing gate posts are concrete, that it is appropriate to replace them in concrete. But I think we have to use our judgment. If we have a house in the district with vinyl shutters or something like that, we would never expect them to be replaced in vinyl. We want to go to original materials. And just drawing to your attention this addendum photograph that I provided, if you look carefully, you can see the gate and fence ironwork is the same as what is there now. And the gate posts of course, were moved. The gateposts shown here were at the Sydenham Street entrance to the Carruthers house. So they would be moved. And I guess we don't really know when the concrete gateposts were built. But I think, to me, they look like a kind of low quality feature compared with the nice ironwork, and it'd be surely more appropriate to have something, a limestone or stone-clad gateposts, which will look much better, last longer, and don't, I don't think they cost any more than having gateposts molded or poured in a mold to, that's quite a big operation. So anyway, that's my view. I hope the applicants will consider the use of, seriously consider the use of stone or stone cladding.
Thank you. Mac?
I certainly agree with Don, and I see the occasionally say that the use of limestone or limestone cladding for the posts may be an option. When they look at forming these concrete blocks to match what's there, it might not be a huge cost difference, and as Don says, it certainly would last 5 times as long as what we've seen that in many of those houses that are built as that kind of full stone-looking concrete, and how they break down, water gets into them, and in the long run, it would certainly. I'm sure over the long run it would be cheaper. I know it's a short term, maybe extra cost, but over the years the limestone will last much longer, and I would certainly encourage it.
Thank you, Mac. Catherine?
I just want to agree with the 2 previous speakers. I think it's. There's no comparison between replacing them as they would have been and replacing them with concrete. I just think that this is such a magnificent site, and it deserves to have the best.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, I would like to make a comment, so maybe you could take the chair.
Yes, recognize you.
I also, with the previous comments, it wasn't until I looked at the file the second time that I realized what was actually happening here. So, sometime in the past, after the building, the early buildings were there was some gates were moved, and it was either then or at a later time when gates were repaired, these concrete posts appeared. They obviously didn't last very long, and they don't look good when they start to deteriorate. So that we can say now, hindsight is 2020, that that decision in the past, probably predating the Heritage Act, but that decision was probably ill-advised, and if we allow it to be made again today, we're basically repeating the same mistake. And I think as members of the Heritage Committee, we know that we have options, like Don said at the very beginning, and although it is in the conditions, because staff probably also thought along these lines, to me the only real way of showing a strong position on advocating for limestone construction would be to vote down the recommendation. Then it goes to council with us not recommending that you use concrete. And that's the only way we can do it under the procedural rules for Part 5, so that's what I recommend. Thank you.
From the chair, thanks.
Councillor Schell.
Thank you. Question first. My understanding is you can replace like for like, and that's the legal way to do it. So I think I'll just leave it at that. Is that basically what they're doing, replacing like for like?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's exactly what they're doing, is replacing like for like. We encourage people to look at options that perhaps would be more period appropriate, but if that's not the applicant's wish, we review an application based on what is submitted, and the applicant's intention is to repair what has existed for half a century on this property, and certainly we're supportive of that in this particular case. So, yeah.
Thank you. Remember, we're adding comments to the file. Council makes the decision. Councillor Shaw, do you want to add more comment?
Well, just that in the long run, if we do, well, we could vote it down and then council agree to it, but in the long run, it can wind up going to the new LPAT, where it would be shot down because they are doing something legal here. Not what we prefer, but that they legally can do. So, bit of an issue, but that's kind of the way the world works. Thanks.
I'll allow Mac to his previous comments. Go ahead.
Just one more comment. Clearly, though, those posts, the original ones were hammer dressed, and I know that's very, very expensive to be done. I would suggest that that if they just had sawn limestone, which would be much cheaper to manufacture, it'd still look very good and be a lot better than the limestone. So just a suggestion, as opposed to the hammer dress is really expensive. I know that, but sawn limestone would look fine there.
Yeah, that's on. Okay. Don, you want to add another comment?
Yeah, I wasn't meaning to suggest the gate posts copy the original ones which are shown in your diagram. I mean, they're very fine, of course, but those gate posts were the main entrance posts to the villa, the Carruthers property, their big house. And now they are sort of side entrances to a courtyard, so they shouldn't need such a decorative and imposing design. But still, they could be stone and with a nice cap, and there are many examples in the district that could be used as a guide to design. So, the suggestion, we're not putting something, requiring them to do something very expensive, in my opinion.
Okay, well, the procedural rules only allow us to add comments to the file, and then we have to say yay or nay to supporting council's approval. That's the Part 5 process. What we advise is not binding. Everyone has made their comments, so it's time to call the vote. On the recommendation, it needs to be moved and seconded. So that Heritage Kingston supports council's approval, the following permit: alterations to property at 67 Sydenham Street in accordance with details described in the application, which was deemed to complete on May 29th. Said alterations to include rebuilding, repairing 2 sets of concrete gate posts, and cleaning, repairing, repainting the metal gates facing Earl Street. There are 4 conditions. Mover? Councillor Schell. Seconder? Catherine? It's a yay or nay question. All those in favor? And opposed? And that carries 4-3. Next is 126 Wellington Street, the last of our heritage permits. Unfortunately, this is a busy time of year for heritage permits. Construction season is in full swing. If we do run out of time, I may ask for a deferral of one of the non-time sensitive items later in the agenda.
And just to clarify, Chair, that this property is actually a Part 4. It's just outside of the Heritage District.
Stand corrected. Part 4. Back to Part 4 rules.
Okay, thank you. So an application for alteration under Section 33 of the Ontario Heritage Act has been submitted to replace 2 small cedar shingled roofs with new fiberglass shingled roofs, to dismantle and rebuild the top portion of the southeast step buttress on the southeast corner of the front elevation, and to repoint various areas of stonework with a particular focus on the north elevation. So the subject property is at 26 Wellington Street, located at the northwest corner of the intersection of Johnson and Wellington Streets. The subject property contains a Gothic-style stone church constructed circa 1864-65 and restored and enlarged again in 1891. So the property is designated under Part 4, and the designation bylaw describes this property as a remarkable Gothic church designed by John Power for the Congregationalists in 1864. In 1891, fire damaged the interior of the church, and the building was restored and enlarged with transepts to plans by J.B. Reed, superintended by Arthur Ellis, and in 1923, the Masonic Lodge bought the property. Today, the property is actually adaptively reused as a kids' daycare. So a site visit was completed on May 25th, and the small cedar shingle roofs appear to be in a very poor and deteriorated condition. It would be desirable to replace the cedar shingles with new cedar shingles, given the historic use of these types of shingles on steeply pitched roofs and how well they complement the Gothic architecture of the church. However, the existing steeply pitched main gable roof is clad with black asphalt shingles, which are acceptable and compatible as a modern roofing material. Fiberglass shingles have a very similar, if not identical, appearance to asphalt shingles. So subject to confirmation of the selected shingle style, the proposal to replace the cedar shingles with fiberglass shingles can be supported from a built heritage perspective. During the site visit, staff also observed serious cracking and open mortar joints on the southeast pinnacle that forms the top of the step buttress on the southeast corner of the front elevation. Staff noticed that the pinnacle was noticeably leaning westward. The quote that was included in the submitted supporting information report notes that the extent of the dismantling and rebuilding required can only be confirmed once the project commences. The repairing and repointing of this pinnacle by a skilled mason will ensure the long-term conservation of the buttress and pinnacle. And it's important to note that these buttress and pinnacles are quintessential to the architectural style and cultural value of the property. So the proposed repairs will conserve and enhance what is a very significant attribute of this property. Staff also observed many other areas requiring repairing and repointing. This application proposes to focus on the north elevation, which faces the post office. Specifically, there's an area on the upper central portion. However, the applicant has advised that they wish to have the ability to repair other small areas should the opportunity arise once the mason is retained. Staff support this proposal, subject to compliance with the city's policy on masonry restoration, as repointing will help to conserve the building's heritage value and structural integrity over the long term. One member did note that it would be desirable to have a comprehensive expert report on the state of the masonry of the entire building. Staff agree with this observation. We have noted it in the cultural heritage analysis of the report, and we've also communicated this to the applicant. And the same member also noted that the fiberglass shingles may be acceptable, but that they should be confirmed with a specific shingle. So we have included a condition relating that we see a specific shingle for the proposal. So in summary, the proposals in this application represent necessary and urgent repairs to the building. And based on the site visit carried out by staff, we recommend that the owner engage a heritage masonry expert to assess the condition of the building's masonry elements and provide a long-term conservation plan. So as before you, staff support the proposal. Subject to a few conditions, including a building permit for the rebuilding of that top portion of the buttress, compliance with the city's policy on masonry restoration, and again, details pertaining to the proposed fiberglass shingle. Thank you.
So part 4 rules. Questions to staff about the recommendation or the presentation? Seeing none, members of the public? Members of the public have a chance to ask questions or make comment. Okay, so we need a mover and a seconder for the recommendation. Moved by Mac, seconded by Don, that alterations to the property at 126 Wellington Street be approved in accordance with the details in the application deemed complete on May 9th. Said alterations to include replacement of 2 small existing cedar shingled roofs to the east elevation with new fiberglass shingled roofs, rebuilding the top portion of the southeast step buttress on the southeast corner of the front elevation, and repointing various areas of stonework with a particular focus on the north elevation facing the post office. There are 3 conditions. So it is now open for debate or comment. Mac.
I say that I support the asphalt cedar shingles. I really have trouble recommending anybody to do cedar shingles anymore. They just don't last. If you get 20 years out of them, you're doing well, and they're very costly. And of course, the rest of the place is asphalt already. It's unfortunate, but they just don't last any longer.
Nice when they're first installed, I suppose. Any other comment or debate? Okay, I'll call the vote on the application. All those in favor? Opposed? Carries unanimously. Good luck. Yeah. So we're looking at the clock. It is 11:54. I think we should be able to get to the end of the agenda. If we get into significant debate on one of the remaining items, we may run out of time. So the next one is the 2017 Heritage Kingston Report Card. This was on the last agenda as well. You see it in the package. And the recommendation is simple, is that we approve it as a summary of the work accomplished by the committee. So I guess we'll go right to moving it and seconding the recommendation so it can be on the floor. Who would like to move it? Catherine? Second, Councillor Schell. Does anyone have anything to say about the Heritage Kingston Report Card? Yes, Don.
I noticed the report makes some suggestions and kind of recommendations for improvement in the future. And it seemed to me that there was some, considerable discussion here that there is a need for a review of the committee, and I think it's really appropriate to mention that in a discreet way in this report. I understand the report is not a place for a controversial discussion, but I would like to see some acknowledgement that there have been proposals for a review, and indeed, I think it's still waiting for the next. Well, it's been deferred, so it's on the agenda.
Well, remember that the report is in the package starting at page 337, and there's language on page 340 about a priority setting exercise. Would be at the beginning of next term. That would, sort of like a strategic planning exercise, that would lead to new direction for the committee, and that would be an excellent setting for suggestions for improvement. But did you have an amendment?
Yes, I'd like to propose that a sentence be added, probably on page 340, and I can leave it to you to find the right place. The amendment reads, after 2 years of operation of the committee under its revised format, some members believe that its composition, mandate, and procedures need improvements and should be reviewed.
So that sounds like a paragraph, maybe second last paragraph of the report.
Mm.
Yeah. So the chair is pointing, or the clerk is pointing out that this is a summary of the work in 2017. Mm-hmm. So, So as such, really only anything regarding the work from 2017. However, there is a paragraph preceding where you would be putting this amendment that talks about priority setting exercise. So, I mean, if it's consistent with that direction that's in the report, I would consider it a somewhat friendly amendment. So that's the question I've got to think about right now. So saying the committee would benefit from a staff-supported priority setting exercise at the beginning of its term, help ensure a balanced approach to fulfilling the breadth of its mandate. And your wording talked about the mandate as well, and a review after 2 years, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So the review of this thing, yeah. So we've got a procedural problem. Is that there was a motion, a review of the committee motion that was made, that was deferred by the committee until December 2018, right? December of this year. So if this is on the same subject and the matter's been deferred, you can't procedurally add it back to the report with if it's the subject matter that has already been deferred by the committee. So personally, I'm tempted to think that there's nothing wrong in stating in the report that there are members of the committee that want to review. So I think I'm going to allow the amendment and let the committee decide whether we should include it in the report. Okay? So it's in order, and it's moved by Dawn. Yeah, give it to the clerk, seconded by Mac. So clerk, if you could just read it out. This is adding a paragraph to the report.
After 2 years of operation of the committee under its revised format, some members believe that its composition, mandate, and procedures need improvement and should be reviewed.
Okay, so Don, you've kind of already started to make the point on the amendment, so do you have anything more to say?
I don't think so. We all, I think you know and we know that this has been an ongoing discussion, and I want to make sure that it doesn't die, basically.
Okay, any other on the amendment? Yes, Mac.
Just briefly, because of conversations about this, I mean, we look at the number of people in the committee and the number that have resigned. I've been involved with this committee for close to 30 years or so, and I've never seen, this kind of a, barely getting quorum, this kind of thing. And we were promised a review. When this committee was reworked, I was on that committee that reworked the committee. We were promised a review within a year, and that's never happened. That's always been disappointing to me. If the review says stay it as it is, and that's so be it. But we were promised a review, and we never got it. Clearly, I think we need it. So,
thank you. Other debate? Yes, Councillor Schell.
Thank you. This has been an ongoing issue, you're right, and many of us have spoken to staff with the knowledge that there's an election coming, and I've also encouraged people to make it an election issue if they want to ask councillors, incoming councillors, what they think about heritage, cultural heritage, built heritage, museums. Because we have been talking about it for a couple of years. Longer than that, actually, too, because many years ago it was how to get this committee to stop being 5 hours long when it was just built heritage. So it's an ongoing, didn't start 2 years ago. The only thing that I find about this that is a little, contrary is that in the report, it says help to ensure a balanced approach to fulfilling the breadth of its mandate, and Don's motion asks that the mandate be reviewed. So they are fairly different. This heritage report suggests that the committee continues working the way it is under the current mandate, but needs to be tweaked. Don's is more to do with really sort of opening it up completely. And I don't know which way it's going to go, because as I say, there's an election coming, things are going to be different. I think they're going to be very different provincially as well as municipally. So I'm not objecting to a review. I don't want people involved in the review to feel that they're being directed toward something like change the mandate. So I guess I can live with reviewed, but we have to be careful. And all the way along, we've been trying to be careful with committees to not have too many, because we don't seem to have enough councillors for all of the committees, and but also to keep the idea that 5-hour meetings are not a great idea. So we've been working, and the last few, well, I realized last month wasn't, but we've been actually whittling down with an increased workload, which I find pretty impressive. So I'll go along with it, understanding that this is an ongoing discussion, but so long as we don't wind up focusing just back on built heritage, when we really did increase the mandate and have managed to get the workload moving in a timely fashion. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to make a comment. It's your motion, though, so someone else will have to take the chair. Someone that's not the vice chair or the chair has to take the chair. So I guess Councillor Schell, you can take the chair.
I'll recognize you.
I'm in general agreement with everyone. So the question really is, does this amendment, which adds wording to my report, which, to be honest, was mostly prepared by the clerk, and I added some wording to it after reviewing what it was saying. I am in general in favor of having frank and open conversations about problems when the problems occur. I do this regularly with patients when patients have problems. Like, we have a good, honest conversation. We face some, inconvenient facts that people tend to want to sweep under the rug, about their own health and things like that. So in this context, I'm in favor of having the frank conversation. I'm encouraged by the wording that's already in the report about the priority setting exercise. That was something I really liked about that was coming from staff. However, I don't believe, even though, as Councillor Schell pointed out, Don's wording does say review the mandate, I don't believe that putting that in the report is going to necessarily result in a changed mandate. It would just be part of the frank conversation that we need to have about whether the mandate is the correct scope for a committee of this nature. That's part of the frank conversation we need to have, part of the priority setting exercise as well. So I don't believe it's out of place or inconsistent with what's being suggested by staff, and I don't think it's inconsistent with what I've already written at the end of the last paragraph, where I thank members for their patience and sort of get at the problem and sort of indirectly by saying that there's been some growing pains, right? If you read between the lines. So I think I'm tempted to support the amendment with the knowledge that all it does is enable that frank conversation that we need to have. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor. Debate on the amendment. Okay, then we'll call the vote on the amendment, which is to be inserted at the second last paragraph. Okay, all those in favor? And that carries. Yes, Commissioner Hurdle.
Mr. Chair, if I may, make sure that it's clear for all members of the committee that even though this amendment is part of the report, that is not a direction to staff at this point. I just want to make sure that that was clear. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Similar subject that was deferred by the committee that's coming back in December is after the election, and that would be an appropriate place for the committee to debate more of a direction that they would recommend to council. So that's the place for that. So thank you for that. Okay, so moving right along, that's the amended recommendation. So now we need to vote on that, which is that the 2017 Heritage Kingston Report Card, as amended, be approved as a summary of the work accomplished by the committee. It's out of context. Okay. Okay, I see. I will recognize a member of the public. Please come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have one question. I know there's been a number of resignations of members of this committee in recent months, and I'm wondering if those spots are going to be filled before the end of the current term. Thank you.
I'd ask staff maybe to reach out to the member of the public after the meeting, as that is not actually the subject of this particular recommendation. So we need to move in a seconder for the amended recommendation, or sorry, the motion that the report card be approved as a summary of the work. Moved by Don, seconded by Mac. Vote on the motion. All those in favor? Opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Now we have working group reports. There are 2 working group reports. Yeah. So this would be a great time for members of staff who facilitate the working groups to maybe give us a quick summary, knowing that we're already past 12 o'clock. about the working group. So the first up is the Heritage Property Working Group.
Mr. Chair, I think the work of that working group is outlined in the briefing notes. I have really nothing to add other than our next meeting, I believe, is scheduled for next Tuesday. So lots of projects in the works.
Okay, moving on to the Cultural Heritage Working Group. Professor Campbell, do you have anything to say?
Thank you, and through you. I just wanted to point out the fact that the Cultural Heritage Working Group is currently working on the planning for an engagement exercise regarding the redevelopment of the first floor market wing of City Hall as an interpretation and programmable space within City Hall. And this relates back to earlier conversation and some comments received as part of the year-end report from the museums about how City Hall is actively being developed and engaged as a museum or National Historic Site facility. There will be a community engagement then that will be the outcome of the planning that group is taking on right now. And the intent of that community engagement is to ask people about themes regarding interpretive strategies for City Hall, narratives that may not be told through the space, but actually do speak to its attributes, associative values as a National Historic Site. So I just wanted to bring everyone's attention to that because it's through these notes right now that you're seeing the work that's being done at that working group, but also noting that there will be an opportunity in the future for community members or committee members, if interested in participating in that community engagement process, to be involved in kind of crafting some of those thematic interpretive strategies for the site over the upcoming years.
Thank you. So we need a motion to accept the two working group, or the set of working group reports. There's actually two from the Cultural Heritage Working Group. Need a mover and a seconder to receive or accept? To receive the working group reports. Catherine, moved by Catherine, seconded by Dawn. Any comment? Okay, we'll vote on it. Okay, all those in favor? Opposed, and that carries. And I think that's it. Next meeting is July, where is it? Who's got it in their package? There it is. July 18th, right in the hazy days of summer. I'm told there are multiple heritage permit applications to be dealt with that are time sensitive. So unfortunately, we will need to try to make quorum for July 18th. So circle that date on your calendar. And if you're at the cottage, you'll have to come in that morning, hopefully. Thank you very much. I need a motion to adjourn. Moved by Catherine. All those in favor? And this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.